kitchen and the set here and go into my house and start cooking for Passover. So this episode is so exciting to me. I'm a lot obsessed with our next guest. Reading her story brought chills to my entire body. I became so emotional when I learned just more about her. Her cooking is fantastic, but her story is even as equally as unbelievable. So before I bring her on, I'm just going to give you a little bio. The first generation American daughter of Belarusian immigrants, Bonnie Frumkin Morales is an author and the chef co-owner of Kachka in Portland, Oregon, widely considered the best Russian restaurant in the United States. Bonnie Morales was named one of Tasting Table's new originals and nominated for Food and Wine's The People's Best New Chef in 2015. In 2018, Morales was named a Rising Star Chef by Star Chefs and a finalist for the James Beard Award for Best Chef Northwest. Morales' first cookbook, Kachka, A Return to Russian Cooking, was released in 2017 to critical acclaim. I'm so excited to welcome Chef Bonnie Morales. Yay, Bonnie! We always hold our breath, is the guest. I mean, we were on, obviously we tested this backstage, but is she coming? We have technical difficulties. What's going on? I'm so happy you're here, Bonnie. How are you today?
I'm great. I'm so happy to be here. So thank you for having me. This is actually, Passover is one of my favorite times of year to cook for. And so I'm just excited to share a little bit with you.
We have so much to get into, but we always like to start the show off with some cooking. So you're making kremzlach, which is how I pronounced it. And I saw written, you did it with a K. Am I pronouncing it correctly? From your background, how is it pronounced?
Yeah, it's so funny actually that you mentioned that, because in English, when you transliterate Hebrew, you always do CH, like Hanukkah, right?
Yeah.
But when you transliterate the same sound in Russian, it's KH. So like holodets is a Russian dish that if you were doing it like Hebrew-y, it would be CHOL, right? But in Russian, when scholars translate, the people in charge of this sort of stuff, they always do KH. So sometimes I write it with the KH and some H with the CH. And also a lot of the people in my restaurant don't have a Jewish background or a Russian background. And so if I do CH, they might say Tremzlach, and so
like chocolate.
Just to kind of help. Yeah.
Totally. So I know.
Help everyone out a little bit. Yeah. But
so my grandfather always made this. And so tell us your recipe and show it to us. Like get it going.
Let's get it going. So this is something that I was talked through by my parents, because it's not something they ever made, but it's something they remember their parents making. And it starts with matzah meal soaking in water, which I did ahead of time because you needed to sit for a little bit to hydrate, and you don't want to watch that sit for 30 minutes. So I pre-did that. And then we use duck confit. So that's duck that's been salted and then cooked low and slow in duck fat, and it preserves it. We use that at the restaurant already. So it's just something that's easy to have on hand. And we're also going to have some
Bonnie, chefs love duck confit. And they love duck fat. I feel like it's like a culinary, secret. It's not something that I think is so easy to replicate at home, although it's not so hard, but it's a little bit more foreign to the home cook. But why is it like such a love and treasure to real chefs?
Well, there's so much. So first of all that fat obviously keeps things nice and moist. So that's always welcomed. But then also there's so much flavor whenever you cook anything low and slow, and salting it preserves it, so you end up with this thing that's basically always ready at your table, or in your larder, you could say. I mean, people keep it in the refrigerator covered over fat. Looks like I missed a bone there. And then it's just always ready. I will say that so the recipe that my parents described involved in their tradition, gribinkis are the duck fat or goose fat with a little bit of the meat still attached. And then that gets pan fried, and it's usually not crispy. A lot of people in the US think that it's supposed to be like pork rinds, where it's like crunchy.
Yes.
And my understanding is that it's actually not. It's actually sauteed and sort of like fried, but still soft. And so essentially this was supposed to be gribinkis. But for us, and sometimes we do have places to use other parts of that duck where we would have just trimmed the fat with the top layer of skin, but we don't always have that. So sometimes we need to switch it up. And this is the most sort of like, this is for me the easiest thing to replicate anywhere, because a lot of, if you're not willing to do duck confit at home, a lot of nicer grocers carry it too. So it's something you can get if you don't want to deal with it. But you can easily do the same exact thing, like I said, with any part of the duck or goose, with just making sure there's a good amount of the skin attached. And if you're going to do it from raw, it doesn't really change anything, because what we're going to do next is we're going to saute some of the onions that I've chopped up. This is about 1/4 of an onion here, with my diced up duck. That has, like I said, that you want the skin. So as much of the skin to the duck that you can get.
It's like crazy flavor that you're building here in this pan when you can combine those onions and that duck. I saw you started a little bit of oil in the pan, Bonnie. Is that olive oil?
I just grabbed whatever oil was handy. I always have sunflower oil. That's just, again, Russian, Ukrainian, Belarus, all the sort of central, like Russian and central Russia, and actually down into Georgia. That's sort of the primary oil used. It's sort of the olive oil of that region. So I like to stay true to my roots in that way. And so I've actually recently basically like kept olive oil out of my kitchen, but only like, that's just very personal and nobody else has to go that far. It's really just any cooking oil.
Well, you don't become the best Russian restaurant in the entire United States without just keeping it, true to the roots. So we appreciate that tidbit, because I actually didn't know that. My parents were born in Transylvania, so I, like you, am first generation American. So there's some similarities overlapping in that Eastern European space, but I didn't know that about the oil. So I love learning that.
Yeah, it's really funny that's something that doesn't come up very often. But if you actually travel to the region and you go to markets and stuff, you'll actually see like women in a lot of these places come to market with their own freshly pressed oils, sunflower oils, and you can actually taste like one woman's oil to the next is totally different flavor. It just has to do with the seeds that they're using. And here, that sort of level of scrutiny and like sort of artisanship with sunflower oil is never even discussed. It's seen a little bit more as a commodity, and often you only find the really, really refined stuff. And there it's just like transportive, because you have all these like very specific flavors of sunflower oil, and some are roasted more and some are roasted less. And it's just amazing. So if you ever make your way back to that region of the world, I definitely recommend seeking out some really delicious sunflower. I mean, there are some okay ones that are imported as well. And we carry a couple of that we've found that we love. But yeah.
Mention that, Bonnie. A lot of people can get delivery from you or order from you. So Jesse, give a little shout out quick to your website while you're here.
Yeah. We've done all sorts of, pivoting this year. So I'm adding the duck to the onions that are sauteing.
Great. And are we looking to caramelize them or just soften them? Like, where are we going for here?
Yeah, I mean, you want to get a little color. I always like to use the term, I went a little bit less here just for the sake of time, but I usually probably let them go a little bit more. But I love the term hard fried, because that's kind of how, like, my mom, who's not a trained chef, she doesn't know to caramelize an onion takes like 30-40 minutes, and doing this low.
Oh my gosh.
Right.
It's like watching the paint dry. Even though it's so worth it, but still.
It's so worth it, right? But then what I realized actually is that there's actually some beauty to not doing it correctly, and to having the heat a little too high and having the outside really like dark brown and like caramelization on just the surface, while the inside of the onion is still almost white. And I call that hard fried. And to me, that flavor of a caramelized onion is the flavor of my childhood, because that's like how my mom, and I think a lot of moms.
Yes.
Do it.
First of all, Bonnie, we spoke about this before. You've got 2 kids. I've got 6 kids. And to sit there and caramelize as much as I would love to is not always in the schedule. And I didn't actually know there was a term for when I quickly char and burn the outside almost, but the inside's still white. So did you coin the term hard fried?
Yeah,
can I steal it? What's the story?
You can totally take it. It might already exist and I just don't know it, but that's what I call it. So,
But that's like what the mom's cooking at home. And if we're trying to capture the food of our youth, that's how we do it.
The hard fry. So that matzo meal that was sitting and soaking, I just threw my sauteed duck and onion into it and I'm mixing it all up. And once it's
and what's the ratio, Bonnie, of the matzo meal to the water in terms of soaking it?
So here I'm doing a small batch. So I have a cup of matzo meal, a cup and a half, of water. So that's and then to that, the onion is a quarter of an onion, and then I just had that one duck leg. But
I was just more interested in the water to the matzo meal. So I've never played around with matzo meal in that way. So this is exciting to me.
I'm trying to think. I feel like that's the only situation that. Oh, you know what? My mom makes a matzo kugel where she always soaks the matzah, but crackers, not the meal. She soaks it before she makes the kugel. So that's kind of, there's some soaking happening. I've seen it before. Now
I'm saying when I do a matzo ball, I add the water, but I don't soak it. So, or the seltzer. So yeah. Okay, so you've added one egg.
So I added an egg, and I just made. I mean, I could have added it sooner. It's more just that your hot chicken not chicken, duck. And you want to give it a second to cool. So mixing it together and letting the temperature go down a little. And then I've got some duck fat. It's, nice and white and firm when it's cold, but if you let it sit at room temperature, it becomes fluid. So it's a lot easier to mix that way. So there's that. And then
I see a scallion hanging out on the edge of your cutting board. I'm excited to see what we're doing with that.
It's just for garnish. No whipping or anything like that. Okay.
I always say, never underestimate the power of a little green, at the end. You just put a little green on anything, and it's boom, you've served something beautiful.
So I'm just going to grab another pan, and I have some more duck fat hanging out. And so here's just something else to know. This consistency will firm up when it sits in the refrigerator. So what I actually like to do, typically, and we're going to make this now, we're going to spoon it in, and it's going to be delicious. But what I like to do when I'm preparing for a large group, and when we're making, we're doing Seder boxes at the restaurant, for 200 people, 250. So, for that, we have this batter, and it sits and it gets cold, and then you can shape it with your hands really easily. And then you have them all laid out.
When I'm shaping matzo balls, Bonnie, I need to often put a little bit of water, a little bit of oil in my hands because it's sticky. Do you have the same issue with this batter?
Totally. Yeah. So if I was going to wait and let it firm up, I would want to do that. Here, I'm going to actually just spoon this in like I would latte batter.
Just drop it in. Yeah, fabulous.
Again, for the sake of time and not wanting to turn this into a whole thing, we're just going to do this quick and dirty. And it's at the end of the day, it's the same flavor, it's the same everything, same texture. It's just a matter of not wanting to take the time. So I'm putting some more duck fat. You can use anything to fry in. I love being able to really bring the duckiness through at every level here. So that's why I
see that.
In this particular situation. Get a little bit more in there.
So Bonnie, is this on the menu year round, or is this just a special Passover dish?
This is just for Passover. We're not a Jewish restaurant. And so a few years in, I started to realize that I was kind of missing the opportunity to be able to share that part of my heritage. And it happened to be somebody came to me with the idea to do a Seder meal for this, it was this really cool lodge in the middle of nowhere in Oregon in the forest. Beautiful. And so I thought that'd be it's a good opportunity to go to hang out in nature. And but I really had this opportunity to think through if Kachka did a Seder, what would that be like? And I loved that opportunity, that sort of exercise to see what I would do. And I ended up loving it so much that we started doing that every year as a big communal Seder. And now that we're in the land of COVID, we were so sad that we weren't able to continue that tradition this year and last year. So right at the start of all of this, it was Passover. And so we pretty quickly were like, oh my God, what are we going to do? We have to cancel the Seder. We made these boxes. So anyway, we've been we've been figuring it out. And it's actually in some ways nice because, you know, last year, for example, was right at the beginning of everything, and we'd have beautiful stories like, you know, 3 different generations of the same family come through and pick up their box. They were all going to have a Zoom Seder together, and they wanted to share our meal together. They're just like really beautiful stories that we got to learn about. So,
what's the Jewish community like in Portland, Oregon?
It's a storied community, you know, been ingrained in Portland, you know, for a long, long, long time. I moved here 10 years ago, so I'm not super, like, I don't want to misspeak about the history and all that because that's not.
Yeah, for sure. But I'm just wondering, is it small? Is it large? You know, that kind of thing.
I mean, I would say it's small but mighty. The synagogue we belong to is right in the center of downtown Portland. It's this beautiful historic temple, and you know, it has so much history and love, and I love it.
And I think I saw on your Instagram feed, and I don't know if this is still true or how recent it is, that you put the afikomen on your menu like year round. Is that like real? And I love what you did to the afikomen. It never looked and sounded so delicious.
That's not. It's just for Passover as well, but you know, it's not how it should be. I mean, you should have your last bite of matzah be just matzah, but I liked the idea of treating it like dessert since it's supposed to be the last thing you taste.
Yes.
So yeah, we did this sort of like a crunch with cocoa nibs and sour cherries and hazelnuts, and it's craveable. You know? Yes,
it sounds it. Okay, so what are we looking for in our creme salak? Like light brown, dark brown?
Yeah. So hold on. I have to do this on camera while everyone's watching.
I know. Forget about, you're like, you want to say to people, I really do know how to cook. It's just totally different when everyone's like this.
Yeah, so I'm shallow frying them here. Like you can see, nice active bubbles. I'm keeping my heat moderate. Nice golden even color, and we're going to want that on the other side too. And that's really what you're going for. Pretty straightforward.
Great. And how are we going to drain this after? You have like a paper towel line pan or cook?
I don't know if you can see if this is on camera, but yeah, let's do this. So yeah, I use just a rack with a sheet tray, and everything will come dripping through. That doesn't want to hang on. And so we'll do that for the sake of time, just because I'm going to, like, if it was just, again, if I was doing this for a group and I was going to heat them up later, which, you know, by the way, another thing that's great about this is because there's so much beautiful duck fat in there, it's so flavorful and rich that if you do this ahead and then pop it in the oven, like I love up on a rack like this, put it back in the oven at a high temperature to reheat, it'll re-crisp. And so it actually is such a perfect cook ahead item, because it feel like something crispy like this, it seems like something you would have to make a la minute, and you actually don't. So anyway, since I'm gonna like eat it now, I'll lay a paper towel down so it has something quick to drain on.
Yeah. But that's a great tip. A great tip, because people are always asking. It comes up with on Hanukkah time with the latkes, and it's like, obviously there's nothing so good about, you know, nothing like a latke straight out of the pan, but I love that this has a little bit more legs and have the ability to reheat in a different kind of way.
Yeah. If treated well, just like a latke, it's obviously 100% when it's straight out of the pan, but I'd say it's like 98% there reheated. You don't really lose that much.
Amazing.
So I mean, the only other thing here is, I mean, I'm gonna say, I know it's not what you want to hear, but I always eat these with sour cream.
No. Well, we can do, you know, I know a Russian tradition is like sour cream and everything, and like cream and caviar. But I love, first of all, there are lots of non-dairy, you know, sour creams out there, you know, for a kosher kitchen. And let's just say you are doing a non-dairy version. Can you give me any other suggestions for topping? You know, like horseradish, is that something that could go with this? Or
absolutely.
I'm just throwing an idea out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Horseradish, any sort of a pesto of some sort, like I would love to see this with like a pea stew or something like that, like other like spring vegetable mash, essentially turned into a sauce, like a bunch of herbs in there.
I feel like it could do really well with herbs. Because of the duck fat? Like I feel like the herbs need something a little bit bright, you know?
Yeah, exactly. So you can, I wouldn't necessarily reach for basil. So when I say pesto, I don't necessarily mean that in the very traditional sense, but yeah, any herb, I mean, parsley would be amazing here. And then like I love rhubarb this time of year. In fact, like you know, Ashkenazi background. So our haroset is always apples in my mom's kitchen. Since I've taken over Seder's, it's always rhubarb, because for me, apples are just not what they should be this time of year. And so I always recommend in general, like think of rhubarb as the like Seder apple, you know, like it's that crunchy, tart, fresh fruit. So like you could put like a rhubarb haroset with this and it would be delicious.
First of all, Chef Bonnie, I am obsessed with that idea. And I was just on Clubhouse. I don't know if you've gotten on the app lately. And we were talking about harosets from around the world and how like there's Indian inspired harosets. There's very Sephardic harosets, which are very date rich and kind of like a spread or preserves. Mine was always apple, but this rhubarb is like really genius. I love it.
Yeah, you should try it. You know, a lot of people are surprised to find out that rhubarb is just delicious raw. I think the assumption is that you have to cook it, and you actually don't. And I like to do a mix. I'll make like a rhubarb butter, and then I will dice up fresh rhubarb or pickle it, and then mix the two together. And it makes a sort of sweet, savory, crunchy, sweet mortar.
Sounds stunning. And I feel like you're probably like pickling queen. Like I feel like someone said the pickles and the smoked fish is very, very Russian. Is that correct?
Yes, very, very true. Pickling queen. I should make that my new title.
Can you hold that a little closer? Totally. Yeah. Well, hold this to the camera so people can see.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Delicious, ducky goodness. Yeah. And it doesn't have to do with duck. Obviously, we're actually doing a vegetarian version with roasted turnips.
Great.
That is phenomenal. So you can obviously go vegetarian.
What about mushroom in there?
Oh my God, absolutely mushroom. Okay. Chicken, if for some reason duck is like either inaccessible to you or that's too weird. Chicken is an easy sub as well with schmaltz.
Amazing, amazing. So if you want to just pull up the chair, maybe we'll reposition the camera so we get a little closer to you. We have just a few minutes left, and I want people to learn about your story. The introduction to your book is stunning, Bonnie. I was chills all over my body when I heard the why of Kachka. So let's see if we can get you closer. Israel can even take a moment and bring the camera closer.
Can you bring the rod down? Yeah, the pull down. I think he's working on it. We can start talking.
Yeah, I see. And tell me what you're drinking.
I'm having some green tea, some sencha.
Oh, stop. I was going to have green tea, and I was literally thinking sencha, and then I'm like, I did green tea 2 weeks ago, so I'm actually doing tea with nana. So in nana in Hebrew is mint, and I brought in some fresh mint leaves that I'm going to actually add to it. Like every tea you get in Israel when you order at the end of the meal is like hot water with tons of fresh mint leaves, and then you could add tea bags if you wanted to.
That sounds delicious. You know, I almost reached for the peppermint myself because that's my go-to tea. So we're vibing.
Okay, we're on the same wavelength. So you must tell everyone, Bonnie, the origin of the name Kachka.
Yeah. So my family is from Belarus. At the time, it was the Soviet Union when they left, but I was born here. And my dad, we would always go for walks in the evening. And my dad would tell me stories of my grandparents who I never got to meet because they passed away when I was 4, but they were still in the Soviet Union. So unfortunately, we never got to meet. But his parents, I would always hear stories about them from him. And one of the ones that I most latched onto was this story about my grandmother. She escaped from a ghetto in the middle of the night. She left behind her family because her parents were getting on in years, and they said, if we all go, we'll get caught. You go yourself. She left in the middle of the night with her 3-month-old child in her arms and just headed. She's in Belarus at this time, so she just headed east towards Russia. And just going through the forest. And this is October, and one of the coldest months or coldest years on record. And she ends up burying her son along the way, barely making it. She ends up along her route. She comes up against Starosta, which is translates to kind of like town warden, who was appointed by the Germans. And he's, accusing her, you're a Jew, I need to take you in. And she's like, no, 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 I'm Ukrainian. And for understanding there, the complexion of an average Ukrainian is a little bit darker. So you can kind of say, that's who I am, instead of, because in Belarus, the non-Jews were very different looking, very pale. Anyway, so she's saying, no, no, I'm Ukrainian, I'm Ukrainian. And he said, oh yeah, if you're Ukrainian, how do you say duck in Ukrainian? In Russian, it's utka. So he would have been talking to her in Russian and asking in Russian. And she obviously has no idea. She doesn't know a word of Ukrainian. She knows Yiddish and she knows a little bit of Belarusian. So she hopes that some of the words overlap. So she says kachka. And he lets her go because it actually is the right word. It turns out that it's the word for duck in pretty much every language around Russia except for Russia. It's like Polish, Belarusian, Ukrainian, and Yiddish. It's all kachka. So luckily that was her magic word, and she ended up fighting with the partisans in Russia, she's my personal hero. So I never got to meet her, but that story to me is like my personal. This story is unique to my family, but it's like when you talk to other survivors or families of survivors, you hear so many similar stories, so much luck and just bravery too. And so for me, this is my personal story, and I love how it connects me also to others. But whenever something is like not going well or pretty rough, first of all, I'm like, what are you talking about? This is nothing in comparison. And then but also that like she, like anytime anything is tough, and I'm like, she buried a child in the forest, and instead of just like laying down and dying, she could just like keep going. And that to me is like the most brave, heroic thing you could do. So to me, that's the one word that like best represents my story, my family story. And that's why we went with that.
I feel that it's a story of the survival of your family, but it's the greater story of the survival of the Jewish people. And I know that you said that your cooking wasn't necessarily the restaurant. It's not necessarily a Jewish restaurant, but so much of the Russian cuisine is your personal, culture, heritage, and the food that you grew up with. Is there, I feel like I have to imagine there's some level of spiritual component to your cooking, just by the way you named your restaurant. But talk to me a little bit about what cooking means to you. It's not just about, I imagine, survival, just eating and making it to another day. But it seems to be about so much more for you.
Yes. I have trouble cooking without a story or a background. I have trouble making any dish without it having some sort of a reason for existing. So, that to me is why we cook, why I cook. I often like to share with people when I talk about like running a restaurant, that when we opened the restaurant, we had this bigger goal of like wanting to share this cuisine with people. But one of the things I never thought could happen or would happen, it wouldn't even have crossed my mind, is, having a diner crying over their bowl of golubцы, cabbage rolls, because the flavor of that particular bowl of cabbage rolls was identical to how their grandmother made them, and their grandmother's passed and their mother never carried on the tradition. And so this is like this like surviving memory that it brought back of their grandmother, and so those sorts of things, that's what keeps me going. And that's my spiritual compass. It's like, I just want people to be able to connect with their heritage. And this cuisine is so underrepresented in the United States that it feels sometimes like if I don't do this, then it might not be done. That opportunity for that person to be crying into their bowl of golubцы might never have happened. And that's enough, because a lot of the times in a restaurant it's hard to find reason to keep going.
Yeah, I can imagine it's not an easy industry, that's for sure. I think we know that, and certainly now, given the state of the world, I imagine the challenges are so great. But I have to tell you, I wanted to message 100 people that I know that would appreciate your food and your cooking, because it does feel so underrepresented. And I thought it interesting reading your bio to see all of your accolades, and that you did study, French cooking and cuisine, etc. Yet you found your way home. So what was the journey for you in terms of going like super classic, like trained chef, culinary, you know, French cuisine, blah, 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 to really bringing it back home? Like, was that, what was the why behind that, and how did that bring you home?
Yeah, the why, I blame my husband. You know,
I do all the time for everything. Agree.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
Israel.
yeah. When we were dating, we were working in a restaurant together. I respect his opinion about food more than anybody else. He has the best palate I know. Super, super well-rounded cook, and he actually went to culinary school so that he could better understand how to manage a dining room. Like, he's so invested and so good at what he does. And anyway, so we were working together at this really, really high-end, well-known restaurant in Chicago, and he, you know, it was time to bring him home to meet the parents, and I warned him that, like, just so you know, like, the food you're going to have here is going to be a little weird. You're not going to like it. It's, you know, just words of the wise. And
what was it? Like, just say specifically, like, what was the spread like that you were, like, you know, preparing him for that reaction as weird?
I mean, something like challah dietz, for example, which is like meat jelly, essentially, like cold meat jelly, herring under fur coat, lots of pickles, of things that are besides cucumbers, you know, just you know, like the gefilte fish, even my mom even makes it year round, just making for Jewish holidays. So everything you can imagine. That I think and the general idea in a Russian household is the most of the food is for zakouski, for the beginning of the meal. And so it's just walking in and seeing just like a table full of like 20 different little bites of things that look super foreign, I think is just really intimidating. And then also there's the drinking component. And so wanting to make sure that he was prepared to not feel intimidated if my uncle tries to like get him to, because and that's the other thing too. It happened to be like a little bit more than just my parents. It was like a little bit of a bigger family dinner that I set him up for. Anyway, he left that night blown away and told me that was like the best meal he had ever had, and just all he wanted was more of that. And so that sort of attitude was like, first of all, like at first I thought he was just like saying that to, you know, suck up to my mother and to me or whatever, but he really meant it. And my mom started to get really excited about the food because, you know, she saw somebody who was excited about something that, you know, no one else in our family, including herself, was excited about for a long time. And so it kind of like reinvigorated her. She started like inviting us over for meals because she's like, oh yes, I made something that, you know, we haven't had since we left Belarus. And, you know, so that was really exciting for her. And so we all just kind of started talking about that food more. And that's how we got into this whole thing, because, you know, he was so excited and made me realize, like, wait a minute, this food that I kind of at best took for granted, but at most was embarrassed by.
Yes.
You know, I went from that to kind of being like, well, wait, maybe I'm the crazy one. Maybe there's nothing to be embarrassed about, and I need to, you know, own it a little bit more. So without that, I never would have gone there. And, you know, and ever since that, it's been our goal and our purpose to just share the food with others. And that's important to me. It's been really interesting. You bring up French cuisine. It's been really interesting working and training others in this kitchen. How many times I have to be like, no, you actually want to cook the carrots all the way. Like, they need to be boiled until they're like baby food. You know, like, are you sure?
So they're like dead.
Yeah. You know, like there's like a lot of things like that where if you're classically trained French chef, you're like, wait, I'm not supposed to do it this way. You know, caramelized onions versus hard fried onions, you know, things like that, where I have to like come up with other words for things because it doesn't really exist. Even though it's been existing for centuries, it just is not in this world. And so that's been kind of a challenge in some ways. And sometimes, like, I've had some cooks, you know, leave after working for us for a year saying, you know what, I need to work in a French kitchen. I'm like, oh, ouch. You know, like, why? What makes you think that that's the preferred? But thankfully that's rare, you know, and a lot of people come to us because they want to learn more about this food. But that's still an ongoing thing, is that this sort of like, why is French the dominant cuisine? And also, if you actually think about French history, most of the best French chefs in the 1800s were actually cooking at Russian court. And a lot of the things that they brought back to
Yes.
France were actually Russian. So,
So
you know, it's so fascinating to me.
Yeah, I so connect to what you were saying about being embarrassed about the food. You know, I grew up in a suburb of Philadelphia, very, very Jewish, but very American. So as you know, daughter to immigrant parents, you know, my father, even though, you know, many years he'd been in America, but I always say he sounds like he just got off the boat yesterday. Like, you know, people have trouble understanding him. And so Hungarian, Romanian, they were from Transylvania. And I remember a girl came over and my mother and grandmother were serving turpusui, which is like a pureed bean dip, which it's so humble, right? It's just like pureed beans and you take a hunk of bread and you rip it off and you kind of like sop it up and eat it like that. And I was like so embarrassed. And she like literally after that, she couldn't get enough. We finished the bowl and then she asked her mom to get the recipe. And that was the beginning of me feeling like, wow, you know, there is something to our special foods and our special history, culture, backgrounds. And this is the last question for you because we're coming up on time here now. How has cooking in this restaurant and your family story and your cookbook connected you more to your Judaism? Because I loved hearing that, like, it was upon request that you started with the Seder, you know, menu, and now you have the Seder boxes, and the afikomen is you made it into a dessert. So just give me a little bit of a connection, you know, to your not just geographical heritage, right, but like the religion as well, or your spirituality or Judaism, however you connect.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, yeah, it is something that I tried to keep separate for a long time. I felt like it was muddying the message. And I realized after doing a few of those Seders that, like, you know, this is actually really part of my experience as a Soviet Jewish immigrant. You know, like, that's a very specific experience. And in fact, a lot of the dishes that I know to be the way that it's done, you know, it turns out is really the Russian Jewish way it's done. And that somebody who lived in the same country, maybe even next door to my parents, who practiced Christianity would have done completely differently because of the sort of the cultural component to that religion. And so that to me just makes me want to own it more. And the other thing, unfortunately, that's happened recently is some anti-Semitism. About 2 years ago now, we were, our bar had an incident where somebody carved a swastika into our mirror in the bathroom. And then there was a copycat who did it on the wall. It was a whole thing. And the police, unfortunately, were not very helpful. And anyway, it was it like shook me to my core. And I felt very seen in a bad way because clearly it was targeted. You know, and nobody really felt, you know, from a authority side of things, didn't feel like they needed to do anything about it. And so it made me feel even more like it was more important to be loud and proud and to make sure to not sort of compartmentalize that. And so I can't say there's like a specific pathway and like purpose and that I have like a mission, but it's like I make a point to not separate, oh, well, that's a Jewish dish, so we're not going to do that at Kachka. You know, like I try to mix it up and keep it like my grandmother makes teglach, which are those like little cookies with bread and honey. And like last year we did that for a special event that was like totally not related to anything. I was like, I just want to make teglach for this. I think it's totally appropriate. And so there's just a lot of that. And I love sharing, and like I get to educate my staff and the community who, you know, is willing to listen. So I've just really enjoyed just learning through that. And as far as the spirituality side of it goes, you know, I'm not particularly spiritual, but my spirituality is cooking, you know, and that's how so like when I'm in there and I'm learning and thinking about it and thinking about my journey and my family, like that's how I connect to my spirituality. And so for me, that's just personally really important.
I love speaking with you, Chef Bonnie Morales. I knew that I would. I cannot wait to get my hands on your book. I think it's tremendous that you're basically salvaging this cuisine, you know, on behalf of the entire United States, really giving everyone a feel and a flavor and a taste of what the Russian cuisine is, and also a flavor and a taste for the Jewish Russian experience, all the way back to why the book and why the restaurant is named Kachka to begin with. If you're just tuning in now, you must, scroll back a little bit and hear that story. And also the way that you brought the Seder and Judaism through your restaurant to Portland, Oregon, which I think is unbelievable. And so I wish you so much success. And I'm so impressed with your reaction to that, what happened in terms of the swastika and the anti-Semitism, and how you've just leaned into it and owned it in such a proud way. You're an inspiration to all of us. And I want to thank you. And I want to thank Israel from behind the camera and the front of the house and everything. And I want to wish you a happy Passover. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Jamie. It's such a pleasure.
Thanks. Okay. Oh, good. I'm so happy to see. I was going to say, Adam, why aren't you putting up all the comments? I want to see what people are saying. I want to know that you enjoyed this. So thank you, Joel. I'm so happy that you enjoyed. I want to also hear from you. Hi, April. The types of food that you want to see, the type of stories you want us to capture. This is Feed Your Soul. And the idea here is that food is so much more than sustenance, right? And we're talking about soul food and Jewish soul food from all over the world. And it's the one thing that can really bring us together and help us inspire each other and have meaningful conversations around the table. So we've gone super over. Is that Rabbi Berg who just commented? Yay, Rabbi Berg. I hope you're watching. Unless there's another Stephen Berg out there, which, it's a common name, I guess. And hi in France. How are you? I want to wish everyone a Chag Kasher V'Sameach, a happy, healthy Passover. In Yiddish, we say Zisen Pesach, a sweet Passover. Health goes without saying. Wherever you are in the world, I hope that you're able to celebrate it with some level of family, whether it's your nuclear family or beyond. And until we'll take a week off for Passover, I try not to work during the holiday unless it's an emergency. And as much as I think this show is important, I don't think it's like a dire emergency. So we shall come back with new episodes after. Thank you for watching. Thank you for eating. Thank you for enjoying. Thank you for commenting. Thank you for making the recipes. I hope you're making them. So I'm thanking you in advance for that. And happy Passover.